When you look at me, who do you see? Do you see a student, a woman, a public speaker? Most of us go through life simply seeing others for the roles they occupy, without truly pausing to get to know the person underneath. But our roles don't always capture the complexities of who we are under the surface. And if you got to know me, maybe you would see me differently. But again, I want to ask you, when you look at me, who do you see? I've been pondering this question since an interaction I had back in June of 2020 in my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. This interaction, if you could even call it that, considering no words were spoken, occurred at a protest against the LMPD, the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department. It had been almost 3 months since Breonna Taylor, an innocent, unarmed Black woman, was shot and killed by Louisville police, and no justice had been served. I stood on the sidewalk with my handmade sign surrounded by my brother, a few of my neighbors, and a couple thousand other protesters. June of 2020 was a politically charged time all over the United States, and tensions were high between police and protesters, especially in Louisville, Kentucky, the place Breonna Taylor and I both called home until she was killed. So there I was, standing on the sidewalk, chanting alongside all the other protesters, when I caught a brief moment of eye contact with the police officer who was stationed on the same corner of the protest as my friends and I. He couldn't have been more than 10 feet away from me, and as we shared this brief moment of eye contact, his hand gripping the gun holstered to his side, ready to defend himself from the protesters should things turn violent, and my arms raised up above my head, holding a handmade sign which read, "No justice, no peace," as I chanted those same words aloud. It was then that I noticed that this police officer who I was looking at was actually my neighbor, Troy, who I had known for basically my entire life. He lived right down the street from me, actually. His wife was my first grade teacher, and I went to school with his sons all of growing up. And here we were, two neighbors looking at each other from across this protest. But this didn't just feel like your typical neighborly run-in. It was tense. And although I didn't know what was going through Troy's head, I had a million confusing and contradicting thoughts racing through mine. So I told my mom about seeing Troy at the protest when I got home that night, and her reaction to the situation was quite different than mine. You see, my mom's the kind of mom where if she has an opinion on something, she's gonna let you know about it. She didn't really want me going to this protest in the first place, and she made little effort to hide this fact from me. When I told her about seeing Troy at the protest, she said to me, "Well, I'm actually glad to hear that Troy was there. That makes me feel much safer with you being somewhere like that. You know he would protect you if anything happened there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Protect me? What was she thinking? So I snapped back to her. "I don't think you get it, Mom. It didn't feel like I just saw my neighbor at this protest. I felt like I was just a protester, looking at just another cop who could use violence or force against any person in the crowd if he thought it was necessary. And what if that person was me?" My mom and I were in a disagreement because she was looking at this situation expecting that Troy would abide by the social contract that exists between two neighbors. You know, the kind of social contract where you look out for each other, you protect each other. But when I was in the situation, looking at Troy across the sea of protesters, I felt like our social contract was that of a cop and a protester. And in that social contract, the cop is armed and the protester isn't. So I tried explaining this to my mom. "You're telling me you think if Troy got an order from his commanding officer to release tear gas or shoot rubber bullets at the crowd, you think he somehow would have done that to every other protester there but me?" Shockingly, my mom actually wasn't the biggest fan of the sarcastic tone I was apparently bringing to the discussion. a tone I was quite familiar with at 17 years old, and our conversation ended there. I often find myself thinking back to this argument I had with my mom. Part of me wants to believe that I was right and that my 17-year-old self understood the social contract between cops and protesters far better than my mom possibly could have. But it also troubles me because I find myself wondering, do I want to have been right about that? I mean, do I want to think that my neighbor would use violence or force on me in a situation like that? What would that mean about my faith in authority, in society, and in humanity? Well, the truth is, neither my mom nor I really knows what would have happened between Troy and I that day, because the protest didn't escalate. It didn't get violent. Troy and I both went home, probably driving the exact same route to get to the same neighborhood where we both lived. We shared the same streets, the same community, the same neighbors. But it was like we were living in these parallel but completely different worlds. This neighborhood, which once served as a safe shared space, now felt like a reminder of the divide that was growing between us. Could we really just be neighbors anymore? Or did we now embody these two opposing forces? As I drove through the neighborhood roads, which once served as the setting for block parties and trick-or-treating, I now felt like these roads led to two entirely different realities. Realities that were shaped by the roles we each chose to play. We may have shared the drive home from the protest that day, but I felt like we were losing our commonality. And I keep coming back to that moment at the protest when Troy and I made eye contact across the crowd, because I wonder, when he looked at me, who did he see? Did he see a protester standing for a cause that challenged the very system he was a part of? Or did he see his neighbor? The same kid who used to play in his backyard, whose family he'd known for years. If you were Troy, who would you see? If he saw a protester, would it have been easier to follow an order to use violence or force against the crowd? But if he saw his neighbor, would he have followed the same order? It's been almost 5 years since the protest, and Troy and I haven't seen each other since. The COVID-19 pandemic went on through the rest of 2020, and I graduated high school in May of 2021, moving to Arizona for college in August of the same year. And it's funny, my mom will sometimes tell me that she saw Troy going on a walk through our neighborhood, or she'll run into him at the grocery store. And each time, she tells me that he asks about me. And each time, I wonder who he sees when he thinks of me now. If we saw each other again today, would he still picture that no justice, no peace sign held above my head? Is it possible to go back to the way things were before, after having our roles exposed to each other so clearly? At the end of the day, I don't know who Troy saw at that protest. But what I do know is the roles we play are never as simple as they may seem. The older I get, the more I experience how these roles always seem to collide. Our personal relationships clash with our belief systems and with systems of authority. At 17, I wanted to think I had it all figured out. You're either a cop or a protester. You're either us or you're them. But as I reflect on my encounter and relationship with Troy, I see how this way of thinking is flawed. We're not just neighbors, but we're not just another cop and protester either. It's much easier to see people simply for their roles. But what's challenging is to recognize the complexity and humanity of the person underneath the role. We all share a social contract as human beings that calls us to see people for who they are, not just for their role. Because at the heart of it all, we all deserve the same simple thing: to be seen.